So I'm happy to be presenting once again on Into Design System Conference. It has been quite some time, and as Carol said, we've actually improved the product quite a lot. We are improving every week, but today is a bit special day because we have something that we would like to show everyone that we've been working on for quite some time. But before we get to this, I would like to go through a small keynote that I have sort of created for you. And the title of Keynote, as you can see, is Killing the Design System Spreadsheet. Now, you know that, and actually, I think on some other previous talks, we have seen this already. There is always a spreadsheet behind every design system, right? And you can use that spreadsheet for multiple things. You can use it to manage your processes, to manage your components, your tokens. But we actually think there is a better way how to do that. And so I would like to show you and talk a little bit about that as well. Now let's start with something more general, however, and that is, let's talk about design systems. So what are design systems? And I know that everyone here knows that, but I promise you it is very important to go through for the context of this talk. So what are actually design systems? What do they contain? Well, they are a set of building blocks, and they have tokens, components, assets, brands, as you will see. But they also have a lot of abstract entities like patterns, maybe some guidelines as to what you should be doing and how you should be building your products. They also have associated code for all of those abstract entities, right? So if you have button, it is abstract entity, but then you have actually an implementation of that button. And this is very important. This is ultimately what design systems are for, to build with the real stuff that was already built. So you are reusing, tokens and components and such. There is also almost always associated documentation, and that documentation is twofold. It's either user facing or it's technical facing. So for your teams or for the consumers, the frontline designers, frontline developers. Now, design systems have quite a lot that goes into them. And so they have processes that drive them. And you can have processes to maintain the design system. You can have processes to build the design system, and also maybe some guides into how you should be adopting and how your developers and designers should be adopting the design system. And almost always they are very specific in their use cases. After all, you are building the design system for your company, so they are very specific in how you use them. They have a lot of specificity in how you build them, and I would say no design system is the same. So now, what is actually a design system? Well, as we all know, design system is a product, and as such, it shares almost everything with a product. It shares a product phases, which is very important. So each design system has a discovery phase. It has some test and validation phase, ideation, how we should be doing the design system and how exactly it fits our narrative, our context, our setup that we have in a company. There is also a planning phase, and then the actual building phase, which takes inhuman amount of time in most cases. And then you repeat this cycle. So really, design systems, even from what they contain and even from how they are managed, are products. And because they are products, people use a lot of tools to manage design systems. Now, you would say that because we have a lot of great tools, and I can switch to the next screen and you will see just very thin slice of tools that people are using to manage design system, you would say that the experience should be great, right? It is always nice to use like Jira tickets for building a new component, or Trello boards, or even Google Sheets, just to track all of this. But the fact is, it is actually not the case. And I think mostly all design ops and DevOps that are managing design systems will agree with this, that the experience with current tools is actually really bad. And so what are some of the issues that the tools have? Well, first of all, the tools like Notion, say Google Spreadsheet and so on, were never built with the design system in mind, right? Using them for design system is more of an afterthought. and they are great in some things, but they are actually really bad for some other. And there is also quite a bit more that goes into each tool. Like if you are using Notion, for example, which is quite common recently, then Notion can do a lot of stuff, but maybe you would be using it just for the database functionality. Maybe you would be using it for the timelines, stuff like this. But there is so much more that you are not using it, yet you actually carry the baggage of the tool with you. Another problem is that tools just don't communicate together. And again, an example would be maybe a Notion and then say Google Spreadsheet. You can do some custom integration. They both can be accessed through API to some extent, but actually it requires quite a bit of custom work, and there is nothing out there or out of the box that you could be using. There is also the problem that each tool actually produces this different kind of data, right? So if you are managing the timelines, you are using one tool. If you are managing some sort of metadata, you are using another tool. And again, the data is not part of the tight ecosystem. So far, tools are actually really bad. So design system people have discovered that they can go around that, and most of the tools can be replaced with spreadsheets. Now, I think everyone here knows a spreadsheet. Everyone here used a spreadsheet in their work. And if I would have to guess, if you are building a more sophisticated design system than you are using them even today, maybe some of you had opened spreadsheet today and changed some values. Now, I would argue that spreadsheets actually run the design system world. We have talked with hundreds of companies, and I would say every second demo that we had mentions a spreadsheet in some form or shape. And it is from the processes to managing components, to managing tokens, to managing say links to a repository, links to Figma components. There is just so much. And this is because spreadsheets are actually really flexible, surprisingly, but they are very flexible. And I think a lot of it is because they are very easy to use, right? So at the base or at its core, the design system spreadsheet would be a two-dimensional array where you have maybe a list of components, and then you would have some attributes that you can set on those components. Or you would have a process list, and you would have components in various stages of that process. And you can be very creative with spreadsheets because of their flexibility. You can actually set up the dimensions, the columns that you are creating, if you will, in any number of ways. There is also the added advantage that the tooling for spreadsheets is actually really nice. Spreadsheets are not really a rocket science, and so I think tools have almost perfected how management of the spreadsheet is done, at least some of the new upcoming ones, which are just phenomenal. Now, I think the biggest advantage, however, is something that is often sorely missing from a design system, and that is a good spreadsheet, well-managed spreadsheet can actually provide you with a very solid top-down view of the entire design system. Right? So you can open up one huge file, and in there you will see all the components and all its attributes, and it's just somehow nice to have everything in one place. And if you don't have that spreadsheet or a substitute for it, then you will have very disparate data and it will be all over the place. With spreadsheets, it is still all over the place, but it's actually much easier. Now, the last one that I want to say is that spreadsheets are so common because they are also so easy to work with that even my parents can actually do that. Now, my parents call me every time when they have like a virus pop up that they should pay some amount of Bitcoin to unlock their computer, or that the printer is not working. But they actually never called me about spreadsheets because I think everyone, including my parents, can work with the spreadsheets, and you can probably agree on this. Now, quite some time ago, Honza Toman, I think everyone's favorite and everyone knows him in this conference, has asked a very specific question about design system spreadsheets, and that is, do you use spreadsheet to track some design system data? And if so, of course, please share the details of what you track. Now, Honza has some nice following, but I still didn't expect that there will be so many answers to his question. So here are a few that I have selected. And I will be sharing all of this after the presentation, so you can be reading through, and I will also share the link so you can see all the use cases that people are using. But just to highlight some, you can see that, for example, James Nash is using Spreadsheet to log and categorize support queries. Then we also saw some Spreadsheets, Figma libraries to be handled through the Spreadsheets, and it makes it consistent. They are using it to map out tokens and naming conventions. So it's all over the place, and potential solution to spreadsheets has to be very flexible. This is one quote that I have found when I was searching through the depths of the internet, and it says, "What scares me is the whole world runs on Excel, name and data intensive critical industry like deep sea oil drilling, power grid management, or international finance. They are all powered by Excel at critical junctures." Now, I thank the NG12 for this quote. It is completely true. In some of the previous projects that I have worked on, I have seen few examples of this, and it is truly that there is one spreadsheet that governs them all, and there is the entire functionality, even of a bank, connected to few spreadsheets that are running Excel macros. So there is some testament that it can work, but it's certainly probably not something that you should be using, right? And I think this is becoming more obvious as you scale with design systems as well. So when we then talk about real design systems and some examples of the design systems that I was talking about and I've talked about with the users, what are the pain points of the spreadsheet that everyone is illustrating? So the first thing is that because it's a spreadsheet, it's basically a green field. Right? You start with the spreadsheet and there is one cell and you are adding some dimensions to it, and then that spreadsheet grows over time. So each team is approaching this differently, and each team will have to invent the wheel. There is basically nothing out of the box, no structure. Some people that share how they manage this, but unfortunately, you always have to have something flexible, and you have to start with something new, because every design system is different, and every process that handles this design system is also different. It is also true that the spreadsheets are just dumb tables, literally. And so the data is disconnected from the design system, right? It's just a text that we are putting into the cells, and there is some data that we are storing in that Excel spreadsheet. And so one of the issues is that because of it, the automation of any kind of spreadsheet is actually really hard. And because spreadsheets are not made for functionality like this, one change can potentially even kill the entire automation chain. So therefore, if you are thinking about automations, you should be sure that everything is like in top-notch order and that everything is stable, because as soon as you need to add another column or remove one, usually spreadsheets break down, then you are calling your engineer, hey, it's not working right. And this is the vicious cycle of maintaining the design system tools that I know too painfully well, and it is why we have started Supernova in the first place. It is also important to note that design systems are always versioned, or they should be, right? You don't want to be distributing your work in progress while you are actually working on something and your application is in production. That would be a no-go. And so the spreadsheet sort of is extension of a design system, but just lives in a vacuum. And so it's not versioned, it's not change controlled, and it just naturally evolves on its own. Now you can argue that probably you can make some process that that will make backups and so on, but it's not so easy. And again, this is because spreadsheet is just a dumb table. One last thing, and we will touch upon this in the demo, is there is just one way of how the data can be presented, and it's a table. You can design a very nice table. You can, color the borders and so on, but it's ultimately still a table. And that gives you nice overview. That's the advantage. But disadvantage is, of course, if you want to render something far more sophisticated than table, you are usually out of luck, or you are in a world of pain because you have to code that yourself. So now we know spreadsheets are okay, and actually not a bad choice at all. I certainly think there is a lot of design systems teams that are happy with the way they are managing the spreadsheets. But I would argue that the tooling of the design systems, and not just us, all the tools are evolving very rapidly. And this is one of the topics that will be very hot and where we can help quite a bit of or help relieve quite a bit of pain from the users, from the creators of the design system. So one last slide before we jump to a demo of what we have prepared for you. What would an ideal system contain? That is a thought or a question that I'm asking also for a chat. If you have some additional opinions, it would be awesome if you write them down. But in my mind, the ideal system that would replace a spreadsheet would actually keep the best of the spreadsheets, right? I think we are on the right track. Spreadsheets are actually pretty good for what they are and for how basic they are. They need to have few additional things going for them, however. The first one is that such a spreadsheet, if you will, or such a system should be fully connected with the design system data. So if you, for example, change a component in Figma and then you link to that component inside your data, you should automatically get that change propagated, right? You don't want to be constantly checking on 200 components and whether someone moved it from one pile to another. You should also be able to manipulate such a system with API or SDK, or just programmatically in general, because the programmatic approach to this actually allows you to do a lot of automation, a lot of very sophisticated automation. It should also be shareable. The design systems are shared across the teams, and they each design system member, I would say, or consumer is expecting something new or something different from such a spreadsheet or from such a view on the spreadsheet. So maybe one person is interested in accessibility, one person is interested in the processes, and maybe where the components are along in the development cycle. There could be someone who is maintaining the tokens, components. Again, there is just a whole lot of things, but usually you are not interested in everyone. And that is one of the biggest drawbacks in spreadsheet, just a giant blob and no way to present it differently. Again, this is then reiterated in the point 5, which is that such a system should be presented in really any way, shape, or form, which sort of connects to the programmatic access as well. As long as you can get it as a data and you can count on the data being flawless, then you can create any kind of representation. It can be tables, it can be timelines, it can be some plugins to Figma or anything else that you can imagine. And finally, and this is what spreadsheets are really good at, the system should be expandable as your system grows, right? So as you are expanding, as you are maybe adding more processes, as you are adding more components, it should be able to be flexible. It should be flexible for the change, and it should be possible to very easily extend the dimension of the data that you are tracking. So now, with that being said, of course, I wanted to show you something, and I think we have talked for quite a long time. So let me switch from the presentation to a demo. Now, we have actually just released a new version of Supernova. So if you want to follow along, you can try it yourself right now on Supernova.io. I will give you a little bit more time to prepare, and I will actually show you one example of a spreadsheet that we got from Laura Silvani, a product designer and design system lead. If you want to make her happy, I put her Twitter handle. I'm sure she appreciates a few more followers. But this is a real spreadsheet that a company that she worked for has been using to track the design system. Now, as you can see, not much is happening, but this only until you realize that there is actually quite a lot of cards that they have, and those cards are about documentation, they are about foundations of the design system, about guidelines. Then there is something massive as components. So let's see, in terms of getting started, there is a spreadsheet that tracks whether there is documented usage from Storybook, something that I don't even know what the key actually means. That is the same for the foundations. So basically the colors, grids, icons, logos, and so on. And keep in mind that this is a dump table, right? So basically, oh, sorry. I was just checking the chat and I saw that there was a message which says, we hear the sound, but not the video. And I got a bit scared. So let's continue on this. If we are talking about the spreadsheet that she is using, you can see that there is some getting started foundations, guidelines, everything has like columns and rows, and it is for different kinds of data. And if we look at something more interesting and more intense, we can switch to components, right? And in here, you can see that they have quite a bit of components. And actually, that's, I would say, a decently sized design system, but still far from the largest that we have seen. And in here, they actually track like usage of tokens in terms of components, right? And there are even people who are assigned to something like this. So there is basically a column that says, okay, there was someone who actually checked whether the data that is here is actually true. And so there is quite a bit more that we can be going into, but as you can see, the spreadsheets are actually quite versatile and they are used for multiple purposes. Now, as I said, in Supernova, we have talked to quite many teams. There is a lot of variance, I would say, to how teams are managing it. I saw that someone mentioned Notion. This would be one of the common tools that everyone is using. But then, of course, everything from Jira to spreadsheets to online or offline version of that. So it's just a huge mess. There was even a company who uses the spreadsheets and then synchronized that spreadsheet through the Dropbox, which is difficult to accept, but I understand their use case, though it is just a huge mess. And as you can see, you actually need people who are maintaining this design system spreadsheet, right? So there are so many columns that they have, and they didn't even start on many of them because I presume they don't have time. So what I would like to show you is our proposed new solution to something like this, while keeping, I think, the main advantages of the spreadsheets, namely having it look like a spreadsheet and work as a spreadsheet, but then adding quite a bit extra on top of that to make it actually a natural part of your design system. So what I will do, I'll switch to Supernova. Now, for those who didn't see Supernova just yet, Supernova manages your design systems. You can manage everything from tokens to components to assets, resources. We also have Notion-like documentation editor. So that editor is actually purpose-built for the documentation of design systems. And you will see bits and pieces of that. It's a very nice experience to play around with it. And also, finally, we have automation of delivery. So you can automate data for your brands, your styles, your assets. We will touch upon that more in our workshop of the brands. But let's not go into that just yet. Let's see what we have created. So as you can see, I'm in a tab called Components Beta. This is what we have been launching today. And we have started with components because usually this is what people start with in their design systems as well. The components are probably the most sophisticated objects that you are tracking inside the design system. And they usually have a lot of extra information about them, right? So let's create one component. You can see that I have my design system selected, which says Keynote Start. I also have a Keynote design system, which we will switch to momentarily. But let's create one component and see what this is all about. So if I create a new component, I can say, okay, this component is button and there is some description. Keep in mind that all of this is flexible, and I will show you how you can use it to basically manipulate some of the data. But let's just fill it with some basic information first. So let's put in the description. A button is made for clicking. That sounds like a great description. And so far, this is basically like a spreadsheet, right? But I think we can do so much better. So what, for example, happens, or how would you track the Figma binding to that button? You know, that button is so far just like a shell component, and it's only name and description. What if I want to say there is a Figma component that is associated to my button? What if I want to say there is a storybook associated to my button, or a React, say, Git repository or Azure repository? Then in a spreadsheets, you would actually use probably like URL or something like that. And if you would change that Figma component or, you know, the binding to something else, it would break immediately, because the spreadsheet just has no idea about what is happening outside of the domain of the spreadsheet, right? But our system is not like that. It always tracks the data inside the design system. And so if we, for example, want to associate this button with some Figma component, I have went ahead and in our Figma binding, I've imported some file that I will be now using. So I will switch to the components, say, select a Figma component from the imported core set, and I will use the CTA button. And now you can see that I actually have connected the CTA button. And the very nice thing about this is that you can go, and because this is a very strong binding, you can actually say, you know, now I would like to see where in Figma it actually is. And you can see that it indeed opens the component on the exact spot where this component is located. So already this is quite useful, right? But we can make it so much better. So next up, something that people are struggling with all the time: is the component ready? Or, you know, is it work in progress? Or is the component broken beyond the redemption? And so we need to get rid of it, but some people are still using it. We would like to document that kind of stuff, right? But if you put that say status, or however you want to call it, into the documentation, then it of course is basically a weak connection, and you have no control dashboard over something like this. But using our system, you can actually automate that. So inside your documentation, all of that data will be automatically updated. So everything here is one unified connected entity: the tokens, the components, the assets, the documentation, the code gen that we have, the delivery. It's like one entity, and it always knows about the changes that we are doing. And so if I change the status, I will select a predefined ones that we have added here. You can see that I have 3 options. You can always edit it if you want to. If you are not happy with however we call it, then you can change the status to something of your liking, or you can have more statuses, more columns that track the status. It's super versatile. You will see more quite soon. So let's add finally the status. I'm actually happy with the button. So I have added the healthy status. I can also say this is documented, and so it's ready for production. And to make sure that this is actually documented, I can bind it to a specific documentation page that you have inside Supernova. So again, if I do this, then you will know that components/button, you can immediately go to that page. And if you need some change, it will actually immediately take you to that page, and it will correspond to everything that you have here. We can be adding quite a lot of information. We can be adding code bindings. We can be adding stuff like more statuses about accessibility, whether it was released. We can bind it to Storybook as well. But, and again, we could be creating this for quite some time. So I went ahead and I've prepared more sophisticated design system that will actually show you this feature in its full force. So let's switch to the Keynote now. And in here, you can see that we actually created a design system that has all the components well, not all of the components, but let's say this is a complete design system, all right? And this design system contains quite a bit more information than we had previously. So again, I have bindings to Figma components, and I can open each one of them. Some of them don't have Figma components, and that is fine, right? Because maybe you have coded them first and then you are designing them. That happens more often than not. We have added the statuses. Some are healthy, some are deprecated, some are documented, and some are not. And that is completely fine. The most important thing about this is fully connected to all of your data. And if you, for example, would go to this button page, and let's say I've added some documentation here, but we would change this to button X. If we go back to the content and to the components, you can see that the documentation actually knows about it, right? I've moved the documentation page, but it still shows a valid link. And so this is not a weak link that you have in Spreadsheet, but actually somewhat living entity, if you will. The really nice thing is that you can use quite a lot of property types for basically the attributes that you are tracking. And we have made a system that allows us to reasonably quickly expand upon those types. This is one thing that I would like to invite everyone to. As you can see, this is beta, and it is a very sophisticated system, but it's by no means complete. And so if you want to participate in this, just go give us your honest feedback. We really appreciate it. We want to push design systems forward for everyone. And so this is really important for us. One thing that I want to show you, I've created a storybook binding here. And as you can see, there is a lot of data that my spreadsheet is now tracking, right? So I have everything from information about whether the color themes are available for this, whether this scales properly for all platforms, whether it's accessible in terms of colors, text, content, and so on. But I can also bind Storybook to this button. So if I open this in the URL, you will see that it immediately renders the Storybook canvas. So you can be very flexible with the structure and with the information that you are putting into it. Now, I have 3-4 more things that I want to show you. The first one, as you can see, this system has quite a bit more information than the previous one, right? You can do this by basically extending the dimensions of this data array, if you will, and we can create one. So let's say UX status. We will create a UX status that we will track across all the components. We will say, I want a select, so selects from a specific options, and maybe put a ready there, work in progress, and not yet, just not yet. This is what developers are asking or telling us all the time. It's not yet, but no, Supernova team, you're amazing. So I've created basically a new property that is 3 select options. And you know, if I want to go wild, I can maybe add some color. I know that I will pick some really, yeah, it's pretty terrible. So I will create a UX status now. And now I can see that I can track a new property on all the components, right? And so I can say, okay, this component clearly UX ready, work in progress, not yet. As you can see, I didn't put the other colors there. So I would maybe change this. Of course, you can do this anytime that you want to. And you can be extending this indefinitely. This was made for billions of, well, I would say millions of rows. So you can definitely handle all of your processes. What is not there, but we will be introducing are views. So you will be able to basically say, I want just the accessibility information, and it will show you basically a drill down version of this. I hope that we will be launching this very soon. So now we have basically prepared data that we would like to use somehow. And you can use this for a lot of things. First one is everything you see here is accessible through our SDK. So if you want to build something new on this, and right now just read, but very soon write, you can do plugins to Figma, you can do plugins to your code editors and so on, and it will always sync with the data. It's very robust system. Now let me just read through the comments. I'm happy that you like it. So now we will move to something really interesting, and that is actually putting this data into good use, right? So let's go into documentation. I said that we have a Notion-like editor, and we certainly didn't lie. It really works like a Notion. Actually, I don't like the X, sorry, and my CTA, I mean, my OCD kicks in. And so for the button page, what I would like to is to highlight a few additional pieces of the information, right? And some of the information that I would like to see is the health status, for example. Is this button actually meant to be used in production? The documentation editor works truly like Notion, so everything is a block. And right now I can, I will just show you in a little bit slowly because I'm very fast with this, a new block that I can spawn. The very nice thing about Supernova is that you can contribute your own blocks into the documentation. So if you have some functionality that you want to see that is connected to our data, you can just put it there. In fact, those 3 blocks that you see here are all custom. They are not made into the core engine of the Supernova, but we can talk about this at another time. Just know that everything in Supernova is customizable and you can contribute your new behaviors, because this is very important, right? So to show the component health, let's just spawn the block. Our system allows you to define attributes that you would like to see in that block. This is why it doesn't render as like the output that you will get in your documentation when you publish it. It'll basically take all the blocks and then construct their visual representations out of them. And what is again really nice is that the visual representations are also changeable. So you can define templates for each of the block that you have, for the tokens, for the components, for the React rendering. There is quite a bit that goes into Supernova. But focusing into or onto the components, I would like to show this button and its component health. So I will select a button as a data source. And then what this block, the custom block that we have created does, is it allows you to additionally show some of the information about the components that you are interested in. I would like to see a persistent link into a Figma component, into a React component, and into Storybook in my documentation. So now I have component health, it corresponds to button, and it has 3 properties. I'll publish, which what it does is basically takes all the data from its raw form and constructs a static documentation out of it, and we can see what was created. So now I have a healthy status inside the documentation here. And if I click on this, we've been very inspired by CZ Design System. If there is someone who was working on them, thank you very much. It is amazing work that you did. And also you can see the additional properties that are in here that I am showing, right? So I can immediately go to Storybook or to React component or to Figma component that I have defined. And if that component changes, then of course this will change here as well. Now it is very important to show you exactly this, because only then you will understand just how powerful and flexible system it is. So I will go back to the cloud. I'll go to the view of the components. And then what I will do, I will go to a button and say, I don't like this. I just think button should be removed. It's core component, but what can we do? So I've deprecated this button. Now this was propagated throughout the entire system with the exception of the documentation, because the documentation is sort of gated by your publish action. You don't want to publish that information onto the live site, right? So I have to click publish, which will basically take all the information from all the sources it has, and then it will construct a new documentation site, which is the same as the previous one. But this time, if I refresh, you will see that the component is deprecated. If I touch on this, or if I tap on this, then you will see that the component indeed changed. But what didn't change is the data. I see that someone has raised a hand. So yeah, all right. So I know that Andy is on a case. All right, so another thing that I want to show you is a few other use cases of this. By the way, a little bit of tease for our brand talk that is happening in a few minutes. This is something that we have also added. It's basically a live compiler of the components. And so if you want to have your components, to be live on your site and have a React code and also be live editable, I would really appreciate if you actually go to that workshop. It will be a whole lot of fun. We have 2 hours, so we can go into all the details of Supernova. To finish off, what I wanted to show you though, let's go into a documentation for the button again, but this time we will use components checklist. Again, some custom block that we have envisioned, and the component checklist was this time inspired by Adobe Spectrum. If you have seen the design checklists, it's amazing. It's not everyone has the capability to do something like this, but now we are actually giving you a tool where at least the management layer is done for you. So again, I will select the button. I will select this time, I will select just all the properties, and I'm maybe not interested in those first ones. I only want the information that are basically the switches, right? Maybe also not the storybook and UX status. So just basically everything that touches the accessibility, variants, behaviors, and so on. I can optionally also put a header here. So component readiness checklist, and I have some additional customization options if I want to. Again, I will republish this information or this documentation side. And now it will basically generate a checklist that is made out of those properties that we have created a little bit before. So if we just scroll down, you can see a component readiness checklist. Some of the data is on, some of the attributes are on, some of them attributes are off. The descriptions are coming from the descriptions of the properties. So you can actually set that up before you start the management work, and they are then propagated to your documentation side. And again, to show you that this truly is connected to that source, you can see that my button is not really ready for anything. So I'll go to the data, I will go to components, to the button, and I will just say, this is the best button that was ever created. And so I will enable all the information and also make it so it's ready. Again, I have to go to the documentation and republish. We will not be touching your documentation side, even if this is work in progress. As you can see, I'm working on shared draft, but you can create a stable version that you are distributing. And if I go to view the documentation, then the button is still deprecated, but it's actually almost perfect, right? So I missed one attribute, but it did change, and you can use that dashboard to track all of the components. And finally, of course, what you would expect, you can also create a full overview of your design system inside your documentation. So let's call it overview, and let's use the third custom block that we have created. Again, just write /component. If you don't know what to write, if you are starting with Supernova, just write what you would expect: token, asset, icon, component. It is all there. I will use the all component checklist. As you can see, not much to say about it, except the properties that I would like to list. And I would like to go wild. So I will say, show me everything. And now what will happen is a new documentation page will be created called overview. Oh, well, that is clearly some problem. A new documentation will be created. Hopefully it happens every time on the demos. So let's try to use just a few less of them and create the spreadsheet. And now it has been published. I don't know what was that, but as I said, it is a beta, it happens. And so now we can see that I basically created the accessibility checklist for my components, right? I can see that all the components or some of the components are accessible. Some have interactive states, some have color themes, and some are properly scaling on the platform. So this way you can basically approach your components as like real semantic objects. You can bind them with the code and with the design, and then you can also create dashboards inside the documentation that are automatically updated with everything that you can throw at it. Now, this is what I wanted to show you. What I, however, do want to say and reiterate is that this is a beta, and you have seen that clearly. We will be on top of that before the workshop ends. But what you have seen is just a beta, and we are releasing components, but we are planning to bring the entire system to tokens, to processes, just everything that you can imagine you would be managing inside your design system would be available in Supernova. And if you are a developer who would like to build something on top of our SDK and API, then please just reach out to me or anyone from the team. We would really like if design systems are, moved by another notch just because of what we are doing, and if the ecosystem sort of goes closer together than it is currently now. I think there is a lot of tools that are trying to do that, and we are certainly one of them. Thank you for watching this presentation.